Last year, I ran an AI engineering interview where we told candidates you can use Claude, use Cursor, use whatever you want. We don't care. In fact, we encourage it. Nearly half the candidates still cheated. When I talked about this on LinkedIn, people lost their freaking minds. Some were downright furious that I would even suggest that you shouldn't cheat. Apparently, not cheating is a hot take, and I kind of get it. But I want to break down exactly what happened, what the cheating actually looked like, why it was super duper stupid easy to spot, and why it didn't help them in the first place. And the point here isn't to help you cheat better. And if that's your intention, just click off the video, right? It's to look at just how broken this interview landscape is right now and why, even if you're completely absent of all morals, cheating is still an objectively terrible strategy. Let me set the scene for you here. I was hiring my replacement for an AI engineering role at the last company where I worked. We had 4 or 5 candidates come through, all virtual. All of them looked really, really good on paper, and many of them were. And again, we allowed and actively encouraged AI tool usage during the interview. This wasn't some gotcha. What we were actually testing was something that AI tools can't really fake. Do you understand what you're building? Can you reason through it? Can you think critically about edge cases, trade-offs, production concerns? Can you have an actual conversation about the code? Like, what's your opinion on testing agents or LLMs or whatever, right? Candidate number 1 looked really, really good on paper. I was blown away. I was intimidated to interview this person. That's how good the resume was. This dude worked at some well-known companies. They made it through the recruiter screening. Everybody was so hyped up for this dude. And I'm like, yeah, man. Comes into the interview. We start asking questions about RAG, retrieval augmented generation, building with AI, tool usage, structured outputs, chunking strategies, retrieval approaches, nerding out on AI stuff. And this dude was kind of crushing it, right? But the answers were super duper textbook style. And by the way, this is the same stuff that we teach developers in Parsity. And if any of the candidates had taken this program, they seriously would have passed the interview. Plug over, but genuinely, that would have ultimately helped them not have to cheat in the first place. Anyway, this dude's answers were good, like textbook good. Like, I'm sitting there thinking, this guy knows a lot more than I do. And I was ready to basically hire him at this point. I'm like, well, this guy's a shoo-in. Then I asked something a little bit off script, and this showed a small chink in the armor. I said, how would you approach a chunking strategy for medical documents versus something like social media posts, right? And if you've actually worked with RAG systems, you know this can get kind of interesting, right? There's no really right answer, but there's certainly a wrong answer. For example, medical documents usually have structured formats, tables, headers, regulatory language. You could chunk them or split them up by section. You could add metadata to tag them, preserve the table structures as HTML. Social media is short, informal, hashtag heavy, totally different. The number of dimensions you're going to use is different. The chunking strategy is going to be way different. There's not a right answer again, but there's certainly a wrong one. And there's also a thoughtful one. This dude gave me a really standard generic answer. And I'm like, okay, that didn't really he didn't take time to think. There was no nuance. He didn't say like, oh, well, it depends on this or ask any clarifying questions. It was just like, oh, this and this. I'm like, oh, okay, that was really, really quick. Now, here's where things got really strange during the coding interview section. During the coding section, this dude had memorized the syntax for some fairly new libraries that you might use if you're developing with AI. Developers, in my experience, don't memorize large amounts of configurations for these different libraries and their methods. That's what Copilot or Claude is for. And we also said you could use the tools. He said, oh, I don't need them for this part. So he just memorized things and typed them out perfectly on the screen as we watched. As he was doing this, I pointed out, hey, you're using an older version of that library. We want to use an agent that has structured outputs. He immediately, seamlessly typed out the corrected implementation perfectly, all by hand. No hesitation, didn't even look anything up at all. And then I noticed something very odd too. This was the real giveaway. His cursor on the screen kept turning into a crosshair, like he was taking a screenshot. And it was right during these awkward moments. And he had these pauses in the conversation. Not like a normal pause where you think a little bit and you look kind of pensive and you look to the left or right and you start thinking and stuff like that. He would just pause for a minute and then the answer would come out fully formed. It was so weird. And so I pushed a little bit harder because I noticed there was something obviously wrong here. I'm like, how could this break? What could a user do that would break this? How could they break this? He gave me more vague general junk. And then he had this really strange pattern where every time I asked a question, without fail, the first thing out of his mouth was, that's a great question. He said this so many times, and at some point I'm like, why does he keep saying that every single time? You can't unhear it once you notice it. It's like the verbal equivalent of a loading spinner or something like that, right? He's trying to buy time while the real answer gets generated somewhere else. By the end of the interview, we were pretty confident this dude is cheating. He's either using AI tools or having something or someone feed him the answers in real time beyond what is on the screen. It just didn't make any sense at all. About a week later, we went back to check his LinkedIn profile because I was genuinely curious about this dude. I'm like, is this guy for real? Like maybe he wasn't cheating. I don't know. Profile gone, completely disappeared. And this was somebody who supposedly had years of experience at big recognizable companies that you and I and all nerds know about. Pretty freaky experience, but I'm not done because candidate number 2 was very similar, right? Came in, looked really good on paper. We get into the coding portion. Now he's coding with Claude and Claude is doing all the work for him. Not too bad, right? I asked a simple question about Next.js. He said he'd worked with it for a couple years. I mean, a simple, super simple question. It's like asking a React developer what use state does. Fundamental stuff. Anybody should know this. He had absolutely no idea, like none. I said, oh, well, that's odd. I said, what would happen if you took away this directive at the top of this file? If you've used Next.js, you probably already know what I'm talking about, but I don't want to give away the answer. He gave me a blank stare, like no answer at all. And then I went somewhere that I think is even more revealing than these stupid syntax questions. I'm like, well, how about this? How would you generally debug issues in a system like this? He gave me this really generic corpo training manual answer. It was like, well, the first thing I do is replicate the issue and then inspect the logs. I'm like, oh, okay, but what if there are no logs, right? Like, what if you're developing locally? Like, what logs do you mean? The server, the browser? What are we talking about here? And what would you exactly be looking for? And what do you do when our agent gives users a wrong answer? How do you debug that? Same generic answer. Well, first I'd replicate the issue. I'm like, well, I just told you what the issue was. Like, what would you do? I'm trying to redirect him and give him the benefit of the doubt. And then he just like kept going back to this weird standardized answer. And I'm like, dude, just get to the part where you figure it out. It was like talking to a robot. And his eyes kept going back and forth on the screen. And he gave some different version of the same answer until finally he just hung up. He disconnected the call. He was gone. And I already bet somebody in the comments is like, well, that's because you bullied him and he had to cut the call short and I would have done the same thing. And this is why you're unemployable. Now, I don't know what happened there, right? But maybe he realized the jig was up, right? Maybe the system he was using to get answers just couldn't handle the follow-up pressure or went offline or whatever. But that was the end of that interview. Now, candidate number 3 wasn't really cheating at all. This is actually more our fault, I believe. There was another pattern we saw and that I see among people that I work with that needs to be talked about because I think it's the most common trap that a lot of well-intentioned developers are falling into. Some candidates used AI tools exactly as they were intended to. Well, almost. They used Claude or Cursor to generate some code to handle a problem that we'd throw at them. But then we'd ask something like, well, how do you think this actually works under the hood? Like, how could you simplify this or modify this? And they would then again put that into Claude and it would simplify it or modify it, but it didn't feel like they had any actual input or opinion. You'd ask them things like, well, how do you feel about testing here? What's your testing philosophy? And they'd kind of just fall apart. They wouldn't really know how to work without the tool. Now, this didn't feel like cheating because it wasn't, but it was just lack of original thought. It was like prompt, paste, accept all, move on. There's no critical thinking layer between the AI's output and the code base. There's no like thought like, hey, this is super complex and I don't really understand how this works. And this isn't about whether you use AI tools or not. Like really that doesn't matter. We told people to use them because that's what the company wanted to test. But the question is, can you think independently about what the tools produce? Because if not, you're a prompt engineer. And let me be very, very clear here. There's nobody hiring for that. Find me a person that has a job as a prompt engineer and I'll send you a box of delicious donuts, right? Now, let me get on my high horse for just a second here. Let's say you don't care about the ethics of cheating. Let's say you're like, these companies want to screw around with me. I'm going to screw you. You cheat. You get through the interview. Congratulations. Now what? Day one, you're on the job. Your new team might be really small, expects you to have the skills that your interview performance demonstrated. They give you a real problem, and then they expect you to be able to figure it out. And then you can't. Because you never could in the first place. You just got really good at making it look like you could for 60 minutes on a Zoom call. So now you're either exposed within the first couple weeks or the first day or two, which is brutal embarrassing, or super anxiety inducing, and you're trying to cover up the gap between what you showed and what you can actually do, and that gap is massive. And then the person or the people that interviewed you end up at the same company as you years from now, which can be the case, especially if you're in a smaller area or even in a large area like San Francisco, where you often will bump into the same people. Your reputation follows you. And if you do get caught, you're blacklisted from multiple sites and multiple companies and multiple people that now know your shady history. And if you think getting a single offer is worth that, let me tell you it's not, because I've met people that have gone through this and it sucks. Whether they got caught doing multiple jobs at once or whether they got caught cheating, there are places that consolidate this information. Certain job sites can have you on a blacklist. Certain companies will have that blacklist internally. So if you went for that company that you really loved and you're on that list, you're likely never, ever, ever going to get in there. Was it worth it? I don't think it is. But I get why this is happening, right? The interview process is broken. It's been broken for a long time. We're asking people to perform these artificial conditions that have like nothing to do with your actual job. And now we've added AI tools into the mix and nobody knows what they're supposed to be measuring anymore. And companies want to have 22 rounds to give you a maybe at the end of it. It's like, I get it. People are pissed. They're like, screw you. I'm going to cheat. Now, what we actually need, in my opinion, in 2026 and moving forward, is interviews that test things that actually matter for your company. Now, perhaps your company really does find value in seeing if a person can traverse a binary tree. Like if you're a Google-sized company, that seems like something that actually might make sense. You're working with people that have strong fundamentals and foundations, so then they can embed into your system and learn all your proprietary stuff. If you're at the 10-person startup, this becomes a nonsense, ridiculous gatekeeping tool that actively pushes away the kind of talent you want to get in. And what's even worse is that many companies are now using AI to then generate the interviews for candidates to cheat with AI on these same interviews. I don't have a solution anymore, but if you are considering cheating, just freaking don't do it. And if you do want to pass your AI engineering interviews or transition from full stack into AI engineering without cheating at all, go to parsity.io/AI-dev. And if you've got a really good cheating story, I'd love to hear it because it is more rampant than I ever would have believed. I hope you found that useful or at least a little funny, or maybe you think I'm a corporate shill. I don't know, but hey, here's a hot take for you. Don't cheat. Anyway, see you around.